This podcast is brought to you by the Islamic Center and NYU. For more information, visit our website at www.icnyu.org.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل وسلم على محمد وآل محمد. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق والأصدق القائلين أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قل لعبادي الذين آمنوا يقيموا الصلاة وينفقوا مما رزقناهم سرا وعلانية من قبل أن يأتي يوم لا بيع فيه ولا خلال. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. This is the seventh part of our conversation on Sura Ibrahim. It's chapter 14 of the whole Quran. We'll go through, inshallah, verses 31 through 41, and we'll stop there, and we'll resume after the month of Ramadan, this series, because next week, inshallah, we'll have discussion that's more suited to the beginning of or preparing for Shahr Ramadan. Over the last couple of weeks in our discussion on Surah Ibrahim, we talked about a whole host of different themes, particularly with regards to how a believer is meant toward gaining in ma'rifah or knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the words of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali alayhi salam, he states, Awwaluddin ma'rifatullah, that the first step, the first stage of religion is to know God. And in reality, that's also the last stage, because in life, we're consistently growing and increasing or seeking toward increasing in our knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the Arabic language, there's multiple words for knowledge or the seeking of knowledge. One of them is ilm. Ilm is often translated as knowledge, but the word that's used in this tradition and in many other ahadith of the Prophet and his family alayhi salam that speak about knowledge, particularly when it talks about knowledge of God, is not that someone needs to know God via ilm, but know God via ma'rifah. Ma'rifah comes from the root word arafa, to know, not only to understand. When we talk about knowledge like that of ilm, we're talking about the knowledge that's processed via the mind. While the word ma'rifah or arafa speaks of the knowledge, some would define it or some would explain it, as the knowledge that stems from the heart. And when we talk about the knowledge of Allah Azza wa Jal, we're talking about the knowledge that stems from this cognizant, deep understanding of one's heart, ma'rifah. So going back to the words of Ali alayhi salam, he says, Awwaluddin ma'rifatullah, that the first stage, the first step in religion is to know God and to then build a relationship with that God through this understanding of heart, not only rationalizing the fact that there is a God, and this God is all omnipotent, and this God is all seeing and all hearing and all generous and all merciful and all compassionate and so on. And we memorize the 99 names of God ritualistically or whatever it might be. Not that type of knowledge. But the first step in religion is to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala via heart, meaning to have some sense of true relationship with Him. A relationship whereby on a most basic level, we understand that we are the creation and He's the creator. But in the depth of understanding that, in the words also of this famous prayer that Ali alayhi salam would recite, he says, مولاي يا مولاي أنت المولى وأنا الأبد فهل يرحم الأبد إلا المولى. My master, oh my master, you are the master and I am the slave. So who will have mercy upon the slave except for the master? Then he says, مولاي يا مولاي أنت الرحمن وأنا المرحوم, that you are the all merciful and I'm the one in need of mercy. So who will have mercy upon the one in need of mercy except the all-merciful. And he recites in this very lengthy supplication known as the Munajat of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, أنت الجواد وأنا البخيل فهل يرحم البخيل إلا الجواد. You are the generous and I'm the stingy. So who will have mercy upon the stingy except for the generous? So recognizing our deficiencies and recognizing the generosity and the might and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these set of verses, firstly, which God introduces himself to us in the first phase of the verses, and the latter, in which Ibrahim, alayhi salam, Prophet Ibrahim, makes a dua or communicates with God, which we'll take a look at in these set of verses, speak to this reality of deep understanding or of ma'rifah, this knowledge of the heart of God. So let's take a look, if you want to follow, chapter 14, verse 31. He says, Azza wa Jal, قل لعبادي الذين آمنوا يقيموا الصلاة وينفقوا مما رزقناهم سرا وعلانية من قبل أن يأتي يوم لا بيع فيه ولا خلال. He says, tell my servants. God is saying, قل, O Prophet, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, say to my servants that they should have faith, number one, and that they should maintain the prayer, number two. And they should give out of that which we have provided them, give out of their wealth, for instance, مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ سِرًّا وَعَلَانِيَةً, give secretly and give openly. مِنْ قَبْلِ أَنْ يَأْتِيَ يَوْمٌ لَا بَيْءٌ فِيهِ وَلَا خِلَالٌ, before that day comes, when there is no more business transactions, meaning on the day of judgment, and there's no more relationships. So over here, let's break down this verse really quickly. God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is commanding the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to advise us of several things. Number one, belief. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, to those who believe, meaning to the people of belief, يُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ. Number one, establish prayer. Number one, establish prayers. Make sure to keep up with one's prayers. On like a more basic or sort of tangible level, the prayers, of course, is that which we perform 5 times throughout the day, and it allows for us to be in a state of the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it doesn't say, and you'll find this is a common theme, right? A common theme throughout the Quran, that God never says like, salli, just go and pray. He says, yuqimu salat, or aqim salat, inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. He said, establish prayer, or stand for prayer. Meaning that prayer is not only a ritual that has to be performed, but it has to be something that is stable in your life. Something that is a pillar, so to say, of one's tradition, of one's life, of one's day to day. In the hadith, it states, "In qubilat qubila ma siwaha, wa in ruddat rudda ma siwaha." That if your prayers is accepted, then your other deeds are accepted, and if your prayers are rejected, then all of your other deeds are rejected. But it really means, again, to be in a state of that ma'rifah, that knowledge of the heart while we're praying, right? Not we just stand and bow and prostrate. God says in the Quran, again, aqim as-salat, establish this prayer, stand for this prayer. Inna as-salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. For surely prayers takes you away from sin, it takes you away from vice. But like, if we take a look at our lives, like we could pray, but if it doesn't take us away from sin and vice, like did we establish the prayer, or do we just pray? There's a difference between someone who performs the ritual legally and does the standing and the bowing and prostrating and memorizes. In the Islamic seminary, when I was studying, we learned more than 800 laws of prayers. I remember the first day I walked into the seminary, my teacher said that there's 800 laws of salat, and you have to memorize every single one of them before you go home. And you cannot be the leader of the community unless you memorize. I was like, oh my God, like that's a lot of laws. And then you realize that there's a lot. And then you can spend years studying these ahkam as-salat, which we did. Someone can memorize from top to bottom every single one of these laws. And someone could understand exactly all of the obligations and all of the prohibitions and all of the recommendations of prayers. But like, if they don't have like their heart, like in the midst of praying, all they're doing is checking off a box, then it's not taking them. Salat mi'raj al-mu'min, right? The salat is the ascension of the believer. That's what it's meant to be. وَيُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ سِرًّا وَعَلَانِيَةً مِنْ قَبْلِ أَنْ يَأْتِيَ يَوْمٌ لَا بَيْءٌ فِيهِ وَلَا خَلَالٌ. And those who give, and give out of yourselves, give out of that which God has given you. The first step is like to remember that everything that we have is from God. Literally, when we say, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, that to God we belong and to Him is our return, with everything. Some people, they get upset, because in Islamic law, there's like mandatory charity. If you're Sunni or if you're Shi'i, right, there's mandatory charity. There's khums and there's zakat and all of these other, zakat al-fitra that is given on the day of Eid, and all of these, mandatory charities that need to be expended. Or going for Hajj pilgrimage is expensive, right? Someone says, why do I need to spend out of my own money to give? That's their problem. But every year, to remind ourselves, as God is saying, but just remember, like, number one, who gave you like that wealth? Like, where does it come from? What is the ultimate origin of it? And give secretly and give openly. Why secretly and why openly? Secretly, as we learn in Islamic ethics, in a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, he says, give in charity with your right hand such that your left hand doesn't know. There's many hadith that speak to this. And how important it is for a believer to give and to perform a good deed in secret. I'll give you guys an example. Now it's, about 10 days or so, right? 9 or 10 days before the month of Ramadan. And it's recommended to fast during the months of Rajab and Sha'ban, more so than any other day. Right? Of course, during the month of Ramadan, it's obligatory. And in some schools of Islamic jurisprudence, some schools of Islamic law, if you're fasting a recommended fast, you're fasting in Sha'ban, you have no outstanding fast that you need to make up. During the month today, you decided to fast, and somebody offered you food. Another believer offered you food and said, do you want to share some? Do you want to have this chip, or can I get you a cup of coffee or something, anything? It is recommended that you break your fast when a believer offers you food, just so that you can hide the fact that you're fasting from this other believer. So if I'm sitting in my office and Hannah says, here, why don't you eat this? And if I'm fasting that day, I should take the food and I should eat it. It's recommended. It's not an obligation. Just for me to hide from somebody else that I'm fasting, because fasting is, again, meant to be this covenant between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this recommended fast. Think about that. How private that our individual worship should be between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يُنْفِقُ مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ سِرًّا. So number one, give secretly. But then he says, وَعَلَانِيَةً. But also give openly in front of people. What is all this about? Why is God saying that? And we're taught that as long as you feel that when you give out of your own wealth, it's not, and you do it in front of people, it's not necessarily building up your own ego. Everyone knows what capacity that they have. Or if Hannah tells me, eat this, and I say, sure, I will, no, I'm fasting today. As long as I know that I'm not inflating my own sort of spiritual ego, saying, oh, look, like I'm better than you because I'm fasting today, you're not fasting. Or I'm encouraging someone else. I give wealth and I do it in public to encourage other people to give, like out of their own charity for a particular cause, for instance. Then in that case, it's not only something that's acceptable, it's also something that's encouraged, which is why God says, give secretly and give openly. من قبل أن يأتي يوم لا بيع فيه ولا خلال. And do this because there's going to come a day when you won't have any more wealth anyway. There's going to come a day when all your relationships are going to be severed. That's the day when you stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment. Who is this God? He introduces himself a little bit more. In verse number 32. الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وأنزل من السماء ماء فأخرج به من الثمرات رزقا لكم. It is God, this God, who has created the heavens and the earth. Why would you not want to pray to him? Why would you not want to worship him in this manner? Why would you not want to build that relationship of heart with him, ma'arafah? And he is the one who sends down water from the sky. وأنزل من السماء ماء فأخرج به من الثمرات. And he allows for the rain to fall down from the sky and enter into the ground, and from the ground, crops and trees and fruits are brought forth for you. رِزْقًا لَكُمْ. I talk to myself. Have I ever been thankful or in a state of gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the fruits that I eat? Say, oh Allah, thank you for this wonderful apple. Thank you for this orange. Thank you for creating oranges. Oh Allah. Thank you for creating watermelon, mango. I think I said this before a couple of weeks ago, that the most beloved fruit in the world is the mango. I read it in some sort of Time magazine report a few years ago. In the world, the most popular fruit is the mango. Makes sense, right?
Not my favorite.
Not your favorite? You're not a brown guy, that's why. Brown people love mangoes, you know that? وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ الْفُلْكِ لِتَجْرِيَ فِي الْبَحْرِ بِأَمْرِهِ. So again, God says that He created this for you. So why not why am I not thankful? Why am I not appreciative? وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ الْفُلْكِ لِتَجْرِيَ فِي الْبَحْرِ بِأَمْرِهِ. In addition to that, He disposed the ships for your benefit, meaning He allowed for buoyancy to take place, that the ship floats in the ocean. God didn't have to do that. Anything that goes in the ocean, He could have fell into the ground. But God, in the language back in that day, they don't understand what buoyancy means, right? It was like a term that we understand. So He says that we have placed those ships such that it, is leveled in the ocean for you. Lakum wa sakhara lakum. We did this for you. We did this for the creation, so that you can travel to different parts of the world, so that the trade can occur, so on and so forth. لِتَجْرِيَ فِي الْبَحْرِ بِأَمْرِ. All of this comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everyone on Instagram is telling me that they love mangoes, by the way. وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ الْأَنْهَارِ. And we dispose rivers for you, so oceans and rivers and the ships that are able to travel. They all come. They're all presented. They're all created for you, for us. Again, He continues in verse number 33. And just take one step back again. Like, God, when God says that we've done this for you, like, we have a responsibility then, right? What is that? At the very least, our responsibility is gratitude, to say thank you. Have I ever been thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Say, oh Allah, thank you for buoyancy. Probably didn't even think about that. We didn't even think about that, right? Including myself. وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ دَائِبَيْنِ. This is a really beautiful verse. وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارِ. And He disposed the sun and the moon for you. Again, lakum. And He made them in courses, da'ibayn. And He presented, and He disposed the night and the day. Imagine if we lived where it was, always sunlight. It's hard to sleep when the sun is out, especially if you're old like me. Maybe for you guys can sleep till 3, 4 p.m. I don't know. I can't. The sun comes out, it's hard to sleep. At the same time, imagine we only had darkness and we never had the sun. On days like today, it's raining, the weather's a little bit depressing. Last week we got a little bit of a taste of nice weather and sun, and you saw the park is filled and everyone is living up their best life. When the weather changes, our attitude changes, right? To be in a state of gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He says that we have presented these for you. وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ for us. And He continues in verse number 34. Who else? What else has God done for us? He's introducing Himself. وَآتَاكُم مِّن كُلِّ مَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُ. And He gives everything you had asked Him. We ask God and God responds. Think about it. How many times do we make dua and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We always remember the things that we ask for, but we don't get. How many things did we ask for and God gave? And how many things did we did not ask for, but God still gave us? Did we ask for life? No, we just got it. That's a blessing. Did we ask for 2 eyes? No, we just got it. Imagine we only had 1. Did we ask for 2 feet that we can walk on comfortably? Imagine we only had 1. We had to hop everywhere. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to us because He knows what's best for us. Going back to the example, God gave us variety when it comes to our fruits and vegetables. We didn't ask for it. We didn't ask for mangoes. Allah just gave it to us. What's your favorite fruit, Rafi?
It's a tough question, but I like prunes.
Oh God. Okay.
And,
So imagine Allah only gave us prunes. We'll be in the bathroom all the time, man. وَآتَاكُم مِّن كُلِّ مَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I never heard anyone say that in my life, that they like prunes. Or that's
I
their
like apples
favorite.
as well.
Okay, apple is good. All right. Better answer. وَآتَاكُم مِّن كُلِّ مَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُ. And he has given you everything that you have asked. And then he says, the punchline, so to say, وَإِن تَعَدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. And if you tried to count God's blessings, you wouldn't be able to. Think about how many blessings Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَظَلُومٌ كَفَّارٌ. And God says, and surely the human being is very ungrateful and always oppressing himself because of their lack of gratitude. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. How can we count at the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The ability to speak is a blessing. The ability to hear is a blessing. The ability to walk, the ability to talk, the ability to remember that we are receiving God's blessing is another blessing. The ability to think about God's blessing is another blessing. The ability to say thank you is another blessing. So every single remembrance or every single thought that enters into my mind that speaks to God's blessings requires another sense of gratitude, meaning it never ends. I can never truly show gratitude to Allah Azza wa Jalla. Which is why he says, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ, you're not going to be able to count it no matter how much you try. And from here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala transitions into this supplication or this dua or this conversation that he presents to of Ibrahim to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is where this chapter 14, takes the name of Surah Ibrahim, of the name of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So we'll go to them quickly, inshallah. In verse number 35, God says, وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّي اجْعَلْ هَذَا الْبَلَدَ آمِنًا وَاجْنُبْنِي وَبَنِّيَ أَن نَعْبُدَ الْأَصْنَامَ. And when Abraham said, "O my Lord, make this city a sanctuary." Which city? City of Mecca. The city of Mecca. "And save me and my children from worshiping idols." Let's go and stop for a moment and understand what he's trying to say. So over here, we sort of, transverse to a new world for a moment after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduces himself. There's not a coincidence. Sometimes people think that why does God, move from chapter A to chapter B in the same verse? It doesn't make any sense. There's a context. First, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is explaining or giving us a little bit of insight into who he is, into what he is. But at the same time, even though God is that great, and even though God deserves all gratitude and so on, doesn't mean that we can't ask from him. Doesn't mean people feel embarrassed or people feel shy. Why should I ask from God? I'm not even grateful. I don't even show any gratitude. Before you go and you ask something from your parents, you might say thank you for everything. Before you ask something from your teacher, from your instructor, from your whatever, you go and you say thank you for everything you've done for me. Now can I ask you for an accommodation on this paper, on this exam, whatever? First you say something nice, and then when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's like that open, he's that merciful, and he's that gentle that he looks forward to us returning back and asking and seeking. Just a quick side note over here for just a moment. Quick tangent. I was reading something yesterday and preparing for month of Ramadan, some talks and whatnot. And amongst the most important rituals that we can perform in these nights leading up to the month of Ramadan and during the month of Ramadan is to seek God's forgiveness, right? We know this. And the word for forgiveness or to return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to perform tawbah. You've heard this word before, tawbah. Tawbah comes from the root word ta'ib, which literally means to return. Okay? Which literally means to return. We're returning back to God. We're returning back to our primordial state, so to say, of no sin, of an emptiness of vice. And we have traditions that tell us that when you turn back and you seek toward returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah also runs to you, so to say. Allah also returns to you. Does he have to do that? How merciful is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such that he has even opened the door and he's called this door Tawbah, right? He's the one who has given us this term Tawbah in the Quran. He says that we have given you the door of Tawbah, literally. This door is open. And God says, and I'm calling it the door of return. All you have to do is say, I'm sorry. All you have to do is say that I made a mistake. And you will find that Allah subhanahu won't embarrass you, right? Sometimes when we say sorry to somebody after we've wronged them, even though they accept your apology, they want to throw it in your face one extra time. Like,